Hello. I'd like to talk about three things tonight. First, the possible reasons why this election theft was so crude and sloppy. Two, yet another mistake that the Democrats made. And three, what happens if there's no president ready by January 20th, 2021? So, why was this thing so crude and sloppy? Um, there's a rumor going around out there, and as far as I can tell, it hasn't been confirmed in any way, shape, or form. So rather than repeat it, I will say that according to the rumor, Trump got 410 electoral votes. Now, I was predicting 400 plus electoral votes. So, for the sake of argument, if we say that Trump did get 410 electoral votes, that would explain the crudeness and the sloppiness. I believe that the Democrats essentially believed their own propaganda, and they thought that Biden was going to basically be neck and neck, and then they would only need to manufacture, a few thousand votes here and there, and it would not be seen as anything out of the ordinary, because we have election fraud so often, and nothing's ever done about it. So, if Trump did get 410 electoral votes, basically Biden got slaughtered, and so they had to stop everything, and um, they had to start bringing in the mail-in votes like crazy. They had to start forging votes, and they really had to go nuts with the vote tabulators, the voting machines. And if you notice, Biden won by a matter of a few tens of thousands of votes in various states. Um, and okay, in California, Biden won by like, I don't know, 70% or something like that. And I think that's probably not likely. Uh, Greg Greg Kelly of Newsmax said that the reason that the counting stopped all at the same time in what, six different states, was that they had to figure out how many votes they were going to need, and it was a gigantic number. Um, as for other states, okay, in Arizona, the Secretary of State says that um, if she allows anyone to check the votes, then that means she's just giving in to conspiracy theories. So, in other words, she's going to do whatever she wants, and that's that. Um, but we know there's tons of statistical impossibilities in Arizona. So I think the likely reason for this incredibly transparent theft of the election is that they had to come up with, I think Judicial Watch says that they've been able to prove that at least 1.8 million votes are fraudulent. And that's just by comparing known electoral lists with votes. So, and in Wisconsin, for example, they went from an average of, um, I think, 70% participation to 89% in this election. And then there was this ridiculous explanation that Wisconsin only counts percentage of voting age people who vote. And that's not true at all. All you had to do, they have on the same website, they have the number of registered voters and they have the number of votes cast. So the previous figures were all calculated from the number of registered voters. They were compared to the number of votes cast, and that's what they did this year. And it went from, a high of 72% to 89%. So I think the likeliest reason for the crudeness was that it was a massive Trump landslide, and so they had to panic. They're gonna steal the election no matter what because there's so much writing on it. But they just had no idea that Trump was going to get. I think it's really hard to keep lying without eventually believing your own lies. It takes a really disciplined person to keep up a front that is completely dishonest. If you ask any undercover cop who goes undercover for very long periods of time, they say it's a psychological challenge because you start identifying with the people you've infiltrated. And I think it's pretty easy for all these people to actually, okay, for one thing, for them to say that Trump is a Nazi and a dictator and all that, and for them to accuse Trump of everything they're doing, they have to lie to themselves. It's not a question of cold political calculation. They have to rationalize their actions, and the way they rationalize it is by saying, okay, when my communist brother called from New York, all he had were accusations against Trump, and I would say, well, prove them. Trump is the most corrupt president in American history. Well, give me an example. Not one. So it's virtually impossible to commit crimes of this magnitude without rationalizing them. Even the worst serial killers and mafiosos rationalize their crimes. The only serial killer I've ever seen who didn't rationalize his crimes was Jeffrey Dahmer. But all the others, even the ones who people claim are rehabilitated, they rationalize their crimes. There was some guy, Tommy Lee, somebody or other in Texas, who got executed. And he was, by most accounts, one of the most savage serial killers who ever lived. And all he did was talk constantly about how abused he was. And it made him feel justified in making children. He was upset that he'd been abused as a child, so he murdered and tortured children because his rationalization was that if it happened to me, then it's got to happen to you too. Well, there are a lot of us with pretty dark pasts, and what it does is it makes us absolutely allergic to the whole concept of hurting children. So if you, regardless of what abuse you've gone through, if you choose that path of abusing others, perfect strangers, innocent people, in retribution, then, you're as bad as the person who abused you, probably worse. Okay, all abusers were themselves abused, and you know, the only way to stop it is to say I'm not going to do to others what was done to me. And, if you refuse to make that choice, then, you're as bad as the person who did that to you. And there's no rationalization that can, take the crime and the sin off of your soul. So that's that. But I think that's the main reason why this thing went so haywire, was that Trump got himself a real landslide, as in 400 electoral votes, and they absolutely panicked, and they went nuts. Um, they were counting on a close election, and when it wasn't even close, they had to go ahead. Um, they had no choice. They put all their eggs into that basket, and so they had to go ahead and keep their fingers crossed and hope that it all turned out all right. They bet badly, and they lost the house. They lost the farm. They bought the farm. I don't even know what I'm saying, but anyway, you understand what I'm saying. So now I made a video last night where I explained several mistakes they made. Well, I forgot to add one that I think may be the most decisive. And that's the fact that after they won, they've increased their attacks, physical, financial, psychological, on Trump's supporters. And there's video after video of cops being even less proactive than they were before Trump spent a year and a half supporting them. This is inexcusable. In D.C., the cops blocked the shortest, safest route for Trump supporters to get back to their hotel, forcing them to go into mobs who beat them up. And you can't excuse that. They knew what was going to happen. Here's what I would have done. I would have sat down on the concrete in front of the cops, and I would have said, "I'm not moving. I ain't moving. Sorry. If they come up and kick me in front of you, you're going to have to stop them. This is a public sidewalk. I'm going to sit right here, a foot in front of you, and I'm not moving. So, screw you, pal. If you want to arrest me, this is D.C. I won't even be charged. I'll be let out and whatever. You know, but those people are used to following the orders of the cops. And there comes a time when the cops say, we're not going to let you travel home safely. You got to go through, what they called Indian country in the Vietnam War. And they don't give you a reason. They just say, go. Then you don't obey. You don't attack the cops. You just sit down on the sidewalk right in front of them and you say, make me. And the worst thing they can do is arrest you. And Antifa and BLM, they're not going to come up and start kicking you in front of the cops. That's a bridge too far even for DC cops. So the attacks on Trump supporters, the physical attacks we're seeing, and the promises of astonishing retribution by the alleged incoming Biden administration. I mean, they're doing all. Their form of healing is to smash us all flat, those of us who refuse to submit. So they heal us by killing us, exterminating us. Trump is watching all this. I heard somebody on the radio say that, you know, Trump's a big baby, so he'll get bored and he'll just go away. No, no. Trump went into this for our sake, and now he absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, abandon us. And he knows that. That's why you have to, if you don't trust him, I don't want to hear from you. I really don't. This guy sacrificed everything for us. He didn't do it for himself. If you think he did it for himself, you're not like me, and I don't want to hear from you. So he's watching these videos, and cold fury. That's what he's feeling. So with every passing day, they make it less possible for Trump to walk away, because the damage being done to us who support him is mounting. We're going to lose our jobs. The governors will all become absolute dictators like Huey Long. We will all be punished. Our jobs will be taken away and never come back, never be brought back. Our cars, will be outlawed. This is an absolute nightmare. And it doesn't matter that the people who support leftism are going to suffer along with the rest of us. Our new overlords don't care about their minions. And I have people tell me, Trump doesn't care about you. Well, again, let's say for the sake of argument that he doesn't. So what? As long as he delivers, I don't care if he doesn't care about me. I didn't elect him to be my boyfriend. I didn't elect him to be my husband. It's I gave him a job. And I don't care. I don't care. But I know he wouldn't have gone into this if he didn't care about us. So everything that's being said to me at this point is projection by people who know that they are rotten to the core. They are standing piles of putrefaction. And they know it. So they're trying to shift it all onto me. So that's another huge mistake the Democrats and their brown shirts made, was increasing the persecution of Trump supporters. Very bad move. Now, this is the third thing I wanted to talk about. Somebody asked me about the possibility of Nancy Pelosi becoming temporary president. Not possible. The Democrats, in their panic in stealing this election by just throwing maybe as much as 2 million votes into this is going to spread all over the country. And there's nothing that can be done. Legislators can elect new slates of electors if necessary, but you have to go back and you have to look at the election of 1875, which they resolved by both houses of Congress choosing an election commission that existed only to resolve that election. And it was 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, and 3 justices of the Supreme Court. And they chose Rutherford B. Hayes. And the reason they had to go to that extraordinary, unprecedented length, which is not covered anywhere in the Constitution, was that every single avenue attempted had a valid legal reason for why it couldn't be done. So, here's the thing that the Democrats did to themselves. If the ballots are still contested all the way up to all the various dates in this year, Congress must convene on January 3rd. They won't be able to. Trump and the Congress people, House and Senate, are all on the same ballot. So there are going to be valid legal charges, legal reasons for not convening Congress. So we will not have a president, we will not have a vice president, and we will not have a Congress. That's how big this could get. So, Congress will not be able to have a contingent election because a contingent election to choose the president and the vice president must be done by the incoming Congress, not by Nancy Pelosi's Congress, not by, the current Congress. The same reasons that you would have a contingent election also apply to the Congress, because it's all the same ballots. You don't have separate ballots. And, Kimberly Klacik and John James, they were slightly ahead in the polls and they got whomped. I think Klacik lost by 70% or 40% or something. So that's suspicious. John James was projected as the winner, and then, oh, look, we found some more votes. So there's no doubt that both houses of Congress were impacted by election fraud. So Trump got such a massive win that the Democrats blew it, and rather than simply accept reality, they went and they did all sorts of crazy stuff that has bitten them in the butt, and the biting is just starting. So we could very well begin the year with no Congress, and there's no law saying that the old Congress stays in place. That's not constitutional, and it never will be constitutional. If we come to January 3rd and then January 20th without a Congress and without a president and a vice president, then we have to go to the presidential line of succession. So you can see that the Secretary of State is next in line, followed by the Secretary of the Treasury. So Mike Pompeo will be the temporary president, and Steve Mnuchin will be the vice president. Now, if they decide that they can't serve, Christopher Miller, the defense secretary, becomes president, and William Barr, attorney general, becomes vice president. This whole thing blew up in the Democrats' face in every possible way. And I think Greg Kelly is right. I think the reason this happened the way it did was that Trump got a real landslide, as in 400 electoral votes, and Biden squeaked by with 100 something, 128, 120. Let's see. There's 535, so you take away 410, and that's 225. So Trump got 410 electoral votes, and Biden got no 125. Math was never my forte. Yeah, so Biden got about 125 electoral votes. In other words, he was slaughtered. And see, that makes sense because he's senile, and he did no campaigning and he did no canvassing, and his vice presidential candidate is the most repulsive politician in the United States. So that makes more sense to me. So even though the rumor is unsubstantiated, I had predicted 400 plus electoral votes for Trump. And if you accept the notion that Trump got a massive landslide of 400 or more electoral votes, that would explain the complete insanity of what the Democrats did. And, whatever you're seeing now in terms of Giuliani challenging things in state courts and everything, he's basically filing cases for amounts of votes that don't really matter, and he's exposing, for example, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Was it the Supreme Court? No, it was a federal judge ruled that the Pennsylvania law that Republicans must be allowed to observe the votes. The judge said, yeah, they could observe it, but from 100 feet away. He said, if the legislature wanted them to be able to observe the votes up close, they should have put that in the law. Well, I mean, for God's sake, like, this is going to be struck down by the Supreme Court in 2 seconds. I mean, that's a completely dishonest reading of the law. And, Giuliani's just proving all this. He's just proving that going through the states is useless. So it's very likely to end up in the Supreme Court. Or there's also the possibility that Trump will simply reveal everything he has, and basically the states will be forced by the entire country to nullify the fraud. And I honestly can't tell you which option Trump will choose. I know what I would do if I were Trump. I would forego going to the Supreme Court, and I would just simply have a press conference in which I made people think I was about to concede, and instead I brought out these huge monitors, and I brought in some U.S. Marine general or whatever, and he just gave this absolutely horrendous presentation with footage from nano drones, and they showed how they had proven that these machines in various countries, these Venezuelan machines, had been used to flip the votes, the vote counts, etc., etc. Because whatever's done has to be gigantic. It has to be the greatest show on earth. And one thing we know about our Trump is that he's the greatest showman on earth. So again, I cannot predict what he's going to do. I'm just telling you what I would do.